Today, we're going to talk about something that's happening all around us, but it's quiet. A silent siege that's unfolding and impacting an entire generation. This is about Gen Z and what we're calling the digital needle. They say every generation has a threat that nobody really sees coming. For our grandparents, maybe it was a war or a massive economic crash, but for the generation growing up right now, the threat is something else entirely. And here's the kicker. It's not something you find on a dark street corner. It's not illegal. In fact, it's something we've all been encouraged to carry around with us. This is a threat that's legal, silent, and quite literally everywhere. So let's dive in. Section 1. The unseen threat. We're not talking about just a bad habit here. This is about a silent addiction, and it's all happening right out in the open. I want you to picture this. It's late. It's 2:17 in the morning. A teenager is in their room and the only light is that blue glow from a screen. They told themselves, okay, just 5 more minutes. But that was an hour ago. Their thumb is just moving on autopilot. Sleep? Gone. Any chance of focusing in school tomorrow? Yeah, that's gone too. And the scariest part? It's all happening behind a closed door, so nobody even knows. Which brings us to Section 2, Engineered for Addiction. And this is so important. It's really easy to look at this behavior and just dismiss it as a lack of willpower. But this isn't about weakness. This is about design. The technology itself is literally built to hook us. Let's look at the actual brain science for a second. Every notification, every new video that pops up, it triggers a little hit of dopamine in the brain. Now, you've heard of dopamine, right? It's that feel-good chemical. But it is the exact same one that's involved with gambling and substance use. And it's not just a fleeting feeling. Over time, this constant loop actually rewires the brain's reward pathways, demanding more and more stimulation just to feel that same satisfaction. The whole mechanic is basically a digital slot machine. You swipe to refresh your feed, that's you pulling the lever. You have no idea what you're going to get. Maybe nothing, or maybe an amazing photo, or a hilarious video. That unpredictable reward is precisely what keeps you swiping again and again and again. So on one side, you have the teenage brain. Its impulse control center, the part that says, hey, maybe stop now, is still developing. It's literally under construction. On the other side, you've got billion-dollar companies with teams of the world's smartest engineers whose entire job is to design apps to grab and hold your attention. It is not a fair fight. Not even close. So, Section 3, the hidden damage. We've seen the mechanism of the addiction. Now let's look at the psychological price that's being paid. The psychological fallout is becoming crystal clear. Researchers are linking all this screen time to rising anxiety and deepening depression. The fear of missing out, or FOMO, it drives this compulsive need to check for updates, while constantly comparing yourself to everyone else's perfect online life just erodes your self-worth. It's the great paradox. We have constant connection that is fueling a really profound sense of loneliness. And what we're seeing is a noticeable decline in some fundamental human skills. The ability to connect with someone face-to-face, to hold your focus on a single task, and to build a stable sense of self-worth from within. All of these are getting weaker. The screen world is actually making the real world harder to navigate. This really captures the paradox perfectly, doesn't it? When a teen feels anxious, the phone becomes a shield, a source of comfort. But over time, that shield becomes a cage, preventing them from ever developing the real-world skills to deal with that anxiety. Okay, Section 4. Why punishment fails. When you see someone you love in that digital cage, the natural instinct is to try and break it open by force, to punish them or just confiscate the phone. But that approach almost always fails because it completely misunderstands the symptoms. I want you to think about this. When you take the phone away and your teenager becomes irritable or they isolate themselves or they get angry, is that just typical teenage defiance? Or could it be a symptom of withdrawal? Reframing it that way changes the entire dynamic. You're not dealing with a misbehaving kid. You're dealing with someone who is struggling with a genuine dependency. So the shift in approach is from control to connection. Instead of confiscation, you try conversation. Instead of punishment, you offer your presence. And instead of just outright banning things, you work together to establish clear, healthy boundaries. Because the device itself is neutral. It's just a tool. The real issue here is the relationship we have with it. And like any unhealthy relationship, the solution isn't just to walk away, but to change the dynamic entirely. Which brings us to section 5, a path to reconnect. This is where we really want to focus on solutions, real actionable steps you can take to reclaim control, not through orders, but through collaboration. All right, first, set boundaries together, like no phones at the dinner table. Second, and this is huge, you have to model the behavior. Put your own phone down. Third, you've got to replace that screen time with real connection through activities and conversation. And finally, listen. Get curious about the why behind their screen time. What need is it filling for them? Ultimately, these kinds of dependencies thrive in silence. The moment you open up a real, non-judgmental conversation about it, you introduce light into that situation, and that is where change always begins. And finally, section 6, it's not too late. This is really a message of hope. With guidance and understanding, phones can go back to being useful tools again, instead of being the masters of our attention. It is so important to remember this. Gen Z isn't broken. They are simply the first generation to grow up entirely inside this massive, uncontrolled social experiment. They didn't choose it. They were born into a world where this was already normal. They're not weak, they are just overwhelmed. And this final quote leaves us with a critical thought. When everyone is doing it, from the toddler in the stroller to the grandparent at the dinner table, the behavior becomes invisible. It just becomes normalized. And that is what makes it so incredibly dangerous. So we are left with this final, provocative question. This isn't some threat in the future. It's happening right now, in our homes and our schools. The patterns being set today could have lifelong consequences. The real question is, will we as a society see it for what it is and act before the damage is done?